Welcome to Innovation Day 2023, presented by Connect. We've got such an incredible array of things happening here, supporting the life sci and tech communities in San Diego.
Well, next, Greg actually is going to stay on, and he's going to conduct a fireside chat with Dr. Paul Saffo, a Silicon Valley-based forecaster who studies the dynamics of large-scale, long-term technological change. In their discussion, provocatively named Chasing Fire, Innovation in an Exponential Age, Greg and Paul will re-examine exponential assumptions in the service of deep innovation in our increasingly digital world. This should be fun.
This will be fun.
Hey, Greg.
Hello there.
Good. I don't think this, is this on?
I don't know, is it?
I can hear you.
Okay.
As long as you can hear us, that's good. There you go. And they're going to, we've already got it up. So what you will see up on the screen is an image that Paul asked us to put up. And what I'm really curious about is why this particular image?
Well, the important thing to keep in mind is this is not the first time we have collectively freaked out about technology stealing jobs, changing life, and ending the world. This particular magazine cover is from 1933. It was a sweetly idealistic group called the Technocrats who saw the end of Western civilization and thought the answer was to eliminate money and replace it with a new currency based on electricity called the erg. And there were actually probably 150, 200,000 technocrats in the country before the Depression and the start of World War II distracted everyone. So we have been through this before.
Is there anything that you see that's different about this particular point in time, or it looks just like many of these other situations before?
Well, you know, one of the most famous things Mark Twain never said was history does not repeat itself, but very often it rhymes. So we can see lots of patterns similar in the past. The constant is human behavior and how we respond to change. The big difference between now and all those other times is all those other times we know how it turned out, and we don't know how this is going to turn out.
We don't. Do you think we've somehow gotten smarter collectively? I mean, you study a
No.
lot of stuff. Okay. And
No, we not only have not gotten smart, I mean, we have kind of gotten smarter, but remember, the growth of population, growth of telecommunications and digital systems means that the complexity has grown even faster than our understanding. So we're in kind of a dead heat on a merry-go-round with change, except that we're falling behind. Now, by the way, I'm an optimist. I'm absolutely an optimist. Though at moments I feel a little bit like, you know, John Jacob Astor, who, while sitting in the bar of the SS Titanic, was heard to remark, "I know I asked for ice, but this is ridiculous."
I like that. I like that. But you study more than just, you know, a technology like AI. You've been looking at, you know, these technology movements for quite a long time.
Yeah, no, I've been in this for a couple of decades. I've been teaching at Stanford for 20 years. And from time to time, I've been accused of being a futurist with a past.
Well, what was interesting is when Paul and I were chatting, he was telling me about one of his classes in started in January of 2020, when you asked the students about something you'd been reading about this, you know, virus that was beginning to gain.
That was. So I teach a class in long-range forecasting. And I'm very much a fan of technology. That with my students in the January class a year ago, I said, okay, you all need to pay attention to generative AI, and you were required to use ChatGPT in my class. And a week later, I said, forget ChatGPT, you're going to go to Discord instead. So force them through it. But no, I mean, as a forecaster, I spend a lot of my time looking for things that seem out of place, things that don't fit. Now, I'm not particularly smart, so I cultivate friends in different fields. And in November 2019, a very good friend of mine, Lori Garrett, who's you want to shoot yourself after talking to her. She's an expert in plagues. And she said, you know that virus pandemic we've been talking about for decades? I think it's arrived. There's something loose in China. And so my class is in January, and it's about methods, but we have a topic. And I came home to my spouse, and I said, this is really exciting. He says, what's that? I said, I think that pandemic everybody's forecast has really arrived, and this is really good news. And she looked at me, and I said, well, even though they're Stanford students, you have to remind everybody about exponentials. And, what better way to show exponentials is with viruses. And so my students did a global forecast of the pandemic in January 2020.
Well, one of the things is that reality is always stranger than the fiction it does, so we can use science fiction or other things to help us think about the future, but very often when faced with the reality, all of that thinking kind of goes out the window, or it certainly gets changed radically. How do you kind of use speculative fiction in some of your forecasting that you do? Do you use it at all, or?
Sure. Well, it can be useful in different ways. The way I think of forecasting is you're mapping a cone of uncertainty that extends out into the future, and obviously it's a term borrowed from meteorology. And the biggest challenge with foresight is making sure you consider all the possibilities and then systematically figuring out how to prune them. Speculative fiction is an interesting thing. Let's just call it science fiction. That there's an amazing pattern in the last century that many of our most important inventions and social events have shown up in science fiction novels about 20 years before. Keep in mind, the word cyberspace was coined by Bill Gibson, who wrote his first novel, Neuromancer, in 1984 on a typewriter. And the atomic bomb was anticipated in several science fiction novels 30 years before. Interesting pattern. It has been said by Arthur Clarke and others, the best way to predict the future is to invent it. And it turns out that a lot of 15-year-olds read about the future in science fiction and carry that vision forward into when they are in their 20s and 30s. I see one troublemaker nodding her head because you probably did the same thing. My favorite example, when you think about cyberspace and the like, there was a young computer scientist who ended up being a key part of the whole virtual reality field 25 years later. When he was a new employee getting a job at a computer company, and this will tell you how long ago it was, when he filled out his job application, one of the questions was, please list your physical defects. This is a long time ago. He wrote carbon-based. So if you want to see what's going to happen in 20 years, read the science fiction today. And if you want to see what's going to happen tomorrow, take a look at what the speculative fiction was that teenagers were reading 20 years ago.
In your class, you mentioned that you had students using GPT. You then had them getting on Discord. What were some of the insights that came out of that are kind of perhaps were counterintuitive or non-obvious for you?
There's an old saying, teach what you want to learn. And two things I'm always find. Every time I walk into that classroom, I realize I'm the dumbest person in the room. I'm a professor at a university that most assuredly would not admit me now as a student. I also own a house in Silicon Valley that I could not afford to buy at market prices. And so we have a motto in our department that it's not sage on the stage, it's guide by the side. And so I'm just constantly surprised by everything.
But were there any things that your students kind of either stumbled upon or had an insight about that you said, that's really good, we should either look at this a little bit further, or, because again, in your forecasting, you're kind of looking out.
Here's a weird one. So I was doing a directed study with a student. We were going to do one sort of project. This is a year and a half ago. And he's in the class of 2024. So quick question, just shout it out. In the depths of the pandemic, when Stanford and other campuses closed down and students were coming to the university, but they couldn't come in person, where were they sitting? Where were they living when they were taking their classes? Come on, someone shout it out. Then their bedroom, right. Except, no. This is an astonishing thing. The student told me something I had no idea of. It turns out that the freshman class of 2024 at Stanford, and this is true at Harvard and everywhere else too, it's just I happen to know the Stanford case, 60% of them did not live at home. That when they learned they were not coming to the Stanford campus, they all instantly got onto Facebook, created a spreadsheet, and all figured out, 60% of them, how to have communal housing. There were 30 Stanford students in a ski chalet in Alta. A whole bunch of Stanford students in Asia said, well, we don't want to go to class in the middle of the night. They came to San Francisco, moved into condominia a couple of miles from campus. And what was astonishing, by coincidence, this isn't being recorded, is it?
I don't know.
Oh, hell, she's not our provost anymore, I can say this. Our provost just happened to be walking past when I was sitting out on the deck at Tresser talking to the student. And I went over and said, Persis, where did the students spend their first year? And she said exactly what you said. I said, guess what? Over half of them were in communal housing. And she said, I had no idea. Interesting implications here. One, think about your freshman year. Think of how out of control you were and all the drinking. Yes, I see someone smiling. You know, it's amazing you remember your freshman year. All these students had their formative freshman experience in the utter absence of parents or supervisors or adults. It absolutely changed their life. That the student's now going to do follow-on work. You know, we think of a generation being changed by a formative event. Pearl Harbor, the greatest generation, the 2008 market crash, or whatever. But you think of a generation as being maybe a decade wide. This is a generation, those freshmen are a generation that are 12 months wide. The sophomores who went off campus already had their social networks, and the class of 2025 just stayed home like they did in high school. That class, I would watch the class of 2024. They have a fundamentally different worldview than everybody else. The one thing, then I'll get off my soapbox here, this is what I see about looking into the future. This is an astounding fact of how these students had such a different experience. But nobody knows about it because for the students it was so obvious it never even occurred to them to mention it to anyone else, and nobody else bothered to ask. With apologies to Carl Sandburg, the future tends to come in on little cat's feet for a while, and it's only after it's been hanging around for a while that it slaps you upside the face and says, guess what, the world just changed.
I like that. By the way, feel free to be prepared and ask questions if you do. We have Paul here, and I'd love to be able to ask him some thought-provoking questions. One of the things I was going to ask you is, when you invent the car crash. There's a series of trophic cascades or unintended consequences that come from all innovation movements. What can we do to either be more intentional aware of that, or as you teach kind of forecasting, do you kind of do anything to help people understand those other than just the direct use of technology?
Yeah, this is a different series. Take my class. That's what it's all about, is cross impacts and unexpected consequences. The one thing I will say, this whole day is about innovation. And, if we ever thought of the actual consequences of anything, we'd never innovate. It's the nature of innovation. Like in Silicon Valley, it happens with small groups of people, shoestring budgets, not a lot of adult supervision, and trying to do something that they didn't bother to ask about, otherwise they would have found out it was impossible.
But particularly, let's say, as AI will be touching so many areas, in fact, if not all of areas of our life, it begins touching on some very high consequence areas, including, healthcare and basically just existence.
Well, okay, first of all, so I love generative AI, ChatGPT. There's lots of stuff going on. By the way, any software programmers in the room? Okay. You're the ones who should be either very happy or very nervous. Forget ChatGPT for conversations. This is a revolution in coding. That what we're about to see is like with some of the code dev things going on, AI today is, for us mortals, and the ability to code like the introduction of PostScript was to graphic arts, that you don't have to be a geek to code anymore. That said, this current generation of narrow AI, so it's classical AI with a little bit of neural nets on top. AI is what you call machine learning in a business plan. This really ain't AI. This isn't this artificial general intelligence. This isn't bringing us closer to the singularity. But the technology is fabulous. When it bumps up against human nature, that's when things get nutty. So who here remembers Eliza? Yeah. You're not old enough to remember Eliza. You read about it, yeah. So Eliza was the first chatbot. Joe Weizenbaum at MIT created it in the 1960s. When I was an undergraduate at Harvard in the mid-1970s, we had it sitting on a computer. I'm not proud of this, but my idea of impressing a date when I was a freshman at Harvard was to take him over to the Science Center and sit him in front of Eliza to talk to Eliza. What I discovered quickly, what we all know, is it's in our nature to want to confer intelligence to inanimate objects, to non-intelligent things. So we're completing the gap there. The machines are not intelligent, but we want to believe they're intelligent, and it's that part that is creating all the turmoil and anticipation. By the way, my first AI company I was involved with was called Technology. It was the very first AI company in the Valley. I have a really great joke about AI and expectation. I dare not tell it in mixed company, but if anyone wants to hear it, check with me at cocktail hour.
I'm going to follow on that because over here we have Ria, who has offered up some of her wisdom. I don't know how many of you have gotten a chance to meet Ria yet, and her colleagues. There you are. There. Well, actually, I'm going to have Paul ask Ria a question. How many of you, just raise a hand, have had a chance to meet Ria? Well, I'd like more of you to kind of go over after the event and.
Understanding your question. Could you please rephrase or provide more context?
I'm going to let Paul ask the question.
Okay, Ria, what's the weight of a European swallow?
Please go ahead and ask your question, and I'll do my best to provide a helpful answer. Sure, I'll do my best to provide short and serious answers. Please go ahead and ask your question. The average weight of a European swallow is around 20 to 25 grams.
20 to 25 grams. Wait, the Monty Pythons are not here, but I'm sure that's right. For those of you who didn't remember that trivia question, that's from Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
So here
let me say something about Ria.
Yeah.
Ria is awesome, cool, and there's a growing population of physically instantiated chatbots. Here's the rule. The importance of an AI in your life is in inverse proportion to its visibility. If you can see it, that's fun, that's entertaining, and it will eventually be important. The ones to watch out for are the ones you never see. In the words of Blanche Dubois in The Streetcar Named Desire, I have always relied upon the kindness of strangers, and today we are all utterly reliant upon the kindness of non-human, quasi-intelligent entities who are laboring away to make our lives more convenient and hopefully less complex.
Okay, so let's open it up to the audience. To you guys, yes.
Regarding your last comment about things that you cannot see, I can understand that from a perspective, but if you look at Ria, she has 37 motors in her face, she has facial expressions, and she's being trained in empathy and interpersonal communication. So children on the spectrum, autism,
I absolutely agree. This stuff has a place. Japan's on the lead. By the way, I also am very purposeful about the technology I use. I do not allow Alexa in my house. I don't have any. How many people have Alexa and stuff like that? Yeah. So I know what it's like to live with a non-human intelligence in my house 24 hours a day, doing nothing except watching me, trying to understand me and modify my behavior. It's a 55-pound Samoyed dog named Misha. And I've already lost with the dog. So there's no way I'm going to let Alexa in to control my life.
Tyler.
I'm curious, when you did the experiment with your students in January 2020, how accurate was the forecast
On the pandemic? So they were looking at the impacts. It was pretty good. What it was surprising about it was, so on January 6th, first day of class, I said to the students, what are the chances that the campus will be shut down before the end of the quarter? And they all looked at me like a crazy person. And I said, I'm not predicting. I want your opinion. By the second week, they said, yeah, we're going to be shut down for sure. So they got things right. What was more astonishing to me was around January 20th, I got a call from the World Health Organization, one of their overseas offices. They wanted some help on a project. And I said, by the way, how's your pandemic forecast going? And they said, what forecast? And I said, you got to be kidding me. What was surprising to me was how slow the WHO and other organizations were in picking up and trying to anticipate what would happen.
Okay, well, thank you so much. And Paul, thank you so much for coming here. Paul will be around.
I really feel passionate about sharing the San Diego talent, elevating San Diego, because it is the best place to be an entrepreneur.